a much higher level. Taoist magic is very, very deep. If you can bend a spoon, you can heal flesh. It's as simple as that. And that is a state of awareness and conscious. So I was healing Mr. Damati, and then out of the blue, he goes, "You're just like John." I'm like, "Oh, John? Who's John?" He goes, "Well, John is this guy that I employ in Indonesia, and he can do all these crazy things, like, burn things with his hands." And I'm like, "Oh, tell me more. Tell me more." I was almost like manifesting this cross stream of relationship. And he goes, "You're exactly like John. You do the same type of healing." And I said, "Okay, well, what exactly are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, I want to tell you this one time I was in my kitchen, and he has this famous trick that he does." And John goes, "Go and get that banana." And he grabbed a banana from off his kitchen table. He goes, "Stand over there." And he took sword fingers and he swiped it. And Mr. Damati's like, "Okay, what?" Nothing's happened to the banana. He goes, "Peel the banana open." He peeled it open and the banana slid off in half. And he was like, "I've never seen anything like that before in my life." And I was like, that is crazy, man. That things are instant for me. When I talk about healing, it's instantaneous. When I channel, it's instantaneous. It's not a ramp up. I channel Lutzu. I channeled Lutzu over 36 years ago, and he's my teacher to this day. They mean nothing. Qigong means nothing if you can't turn the system on. I experienced the stopping of sound for 20 minutes. Everything was silent. I'm looking at her and there was no sound. She's talking away. She's looking around. She'd walk up to me with my eyes open and smile. And the sound had disappeared for 20 minutes straight. And I went, holy shit, this is the superpower I've been looking for. I've only ever seen 3 people levitate in my lifetime. 2 were Indonesian masters, and they could levitate 5 feet in the air. Mo Pai perspective is just like all the other systems that people train in. You need to spend 10 years. That's just a fundamental bullshit lie. It's just a lie. It's like, I've turned people into phenomenal healers given the actualized state within 3 months. This is the lie. Anyone that tells you it takes 10 years to reach Fa Chi is lying. Anyone that tells you it takes 10 years to reach Fa Jin, they're lying. It comes down. Yeah, you have to get a system that's actually repeatable and bears fruit.
People could learn Fa Chi if they wanted to, if that's something they want to do. Not that it's like a important thing per se, but like you're saying that people can learn that in a much shorter time if they follow your system.
1 million%.
Telling us what is your experience of Mr. John Chang and the Mopai system, and can you go into detail on that?
Yeah, I had an employer for many decades who was an employer for John Chang in Indonesia. This particular guy is one of the richest, most powerful men in Indonesia. And I was an advisor to his family, specifically one of his daughters that was stateside. And, I dealt with more deeper, darker nature of, protecting the family from black magic, black sorcery, to physical healing, any type of stuff that requires manipulating the material world. That's what the magic gets to at a much higher level. Taoist magic is very, very deep. And so Mr. Damati, for many years, had been traveling back from Indonesia to America, and I'd been working with him and his family, specifically his 2 daughters, a little bit on his son, but not really. And then there's a tragic end to one of his sons that I'll get into. And we had a relationship for a couple of years. It started back in the early 2000s. And, basically any ailment, from an Eastern perspective, doctors were not the solution to most problems. You go deep into the ancient nature of things, and it comes from the energy. It comes from your spiritual commitment at a much deeper level. So this is something that is universal. Most of the students I have come from mainland China that travel to America for these type of teachings because they don't get it, and they've traveled across the globe for Taoist practices, Taoist temples all over the place, and they're not met with true wisdom teaching. And so, I'm a little bit of even though I've done this for thousands of lifetimes, this is from persona wise or imagery, most of the Chinese culture would refer to me as a guilo. I don't know whether you know what that is, but I mean, it's basically the N word for white people, white spirit. And so there's a distinction, and then there's a phenomenon where they can't imagine how someone who's white can have that much, even though I'm an ordained priest in 2 lineages of Taoism, how I can have so much of an insight, and then the deeper nature of it. And it's all related to the spirit whispering. And so, we refer to it as wuzit. This is the spirit communicator between the realm of man and the spirit world. And channeling is the highest emanation of self in this material world. And getting to the point of Chang, at one point I was doing a healing on Mr. Damati. He sprained his ankle. It took about 30 seconds. When a healing comes in, the darkness arises from the periphery, and then the focus point of the energy on whatever it is that needs to be healed will congeal and wiggle and revert back to its original state, as if you're having some type of mind-melting psychosis. Most people, psychonauts, understand this phenomena where you are literally crossing the visual stream and the optics are converting from left to right brain, and you will visually see things morph and melt back to its original state. I attribute it more commonly to spoon bending, and you're familiar with a dear friend of mine, Sean McNamara, who's
your friends with Sean. Okay.
Yeah, he's a brother of mine. Yeah, he's been on my podcast a couple of times. We got to know each other. So understanding how spoon bending works, I was actually just texting him the other day. Spoon bending is the closest phenomena you'll get to flesh melding. And it's the same thing. When you can actualize that, if you can bend a spoon, you can heal flesh. It's as simple as that. And that is a state of awareness and conscious. So I was healing Mr. Damati, and then out of the blue, he goes, "You're just like John." I'm like, "Oh, John, who's John?" He goes, "Well, John is this guy that I employ in Indonesia, and he can do all these crazy things, like, burn things with his hands." And I'm like, "Oh, tell me more. Tell me more." I was almost like manifesting this cross stream of relationship. And he goes, "You're exactly like John. You do the same type of healing." And I said, "Okay, well, what exactly are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, I want to tell you this one time. I was in my kitchen, and he has this famous trick that he does." And John goes, "Go and get that banana." And he grabbed a banana from off his kitchen table. He goes, "Stand over there." And he took sword fingers, and he swiped it. And Mr. Damati's like, "Okay, what?" Nothing's happened to the banana. He goes, "Peel the banana open." He peeled it open, and the banana slid off in half. And he was like, "I've never seen anything like that before in my life." And I was like, "That is crazy, man." That's like, and then coincidentally, I think there's some documented effect of that in some of the books that are written about him, a very similar scenario where he's able to do this. Now, I find that phenomenal. For me, I've witnessed gangrenous flesh go back to pink in color in 40 minutes, bones fuse, tumors disappear, gashes seal before my eyes. This is not anything but a normal day in the office. You connect with the spirit world and anything is possible. Probability changes, but you have to be the complete vehicle of divine perfection and absolute for you to get a monologue to a dialogue communication. And so from that, his daughter hooked me up with his son at the time that was living in the Bay Area. And we started going back and forth with the information and then he was consulting his father about the Mo Pai system. And, you know, at a closer examination, I was given, I think he surrendered like about 9 levels. I was like, this is kind of infantile shit. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And so I would have a three-way between Nina, which is Mr. Damati's daughter, and then John's son, and then himself, because John didn't speak English that well. It wasn't a great thing. It was like it was pretty much like, it was a stretch. And so that, you know, that to me was interesting. That was early 2000s. And I was getting close to actually meeting him. And then many things sort of arose, but Mr. Damati would constantly refer to John as this, you know, phenomena. Just the way I heal the body, he would do these crazy things. And you have to realize this is a relationship with the spirit world. This is not, oh, I sit here and cultivate and create a fire in my belly, and then I'm, you know, moving the energy. When you're having to touch your body to generate that substance, you're missing the point. And I see a lot of people cultivating these practices. You call it the Fa Chi, Fa Jin. I mean, I would come closer to experiencing Fa Jin because things are instant for me. When I talk about healing, it's instantaneous. When I channel, it's instantaneous. It's not a ramp up. You know, there's nothing more sobering when you recognize you can see something happen before your eyes and go, how the hell did that happen? You know, my most common denominator is people will come to me for more tragic, bigger things. And, you know, mom's in a coma, someone just had a car accident. You know, a lot of my students will, you know, a common story will be, oh, I had my 2-year-old, he was standing on the couch, he fell down and he broke his collarbone. And through the connection of the spirit world, I will infuse the absolute holiness into that state. The next day, the kid will wake up, the collarbone is fused and healed. And it never. These are kind of normal processes, but you can't come in with any half-baked potential. You can't come in with, well, I'm really fearful, but you know, I'm absolutely stoic. Because you know, one of my favorite things to do as a priest is to exercise people. Exorcisms are a dime a dozen for me. I've been doing it for decades. And that was very much a fundamental part of the monastery. One of the monasteries I was ordained in, the actual founder of that was channeling Lutsu as I channel Lutsu. I channeled Lutsu over 36 years ago, and he's my teacher to this day that I commune with on a second-by-second basis. Like I have all the fundamentals of the monastic path through the ordinance of priest, but in essence, I go way past all the magical rituals of the monasteries. I connect with the immortals, and Lutsu is one of my teachers that I commune with on a second-by-second basis. I see him as I see you. I hear him as I hear you, and I'm not 3 cents short of $1. I'm 100% coherent and very clear on my part. I channel him on my channel. You can see channels. I mean, you probably saw that. Who knows? But that is where the rubber meets the road, not the divided self, where you kind of get a little manipulative. And so, on a deeper level, the Mo Pai system is more a farce. You got to realize a lot of these guys are doing what we call in the inner circles. We call this rice bowl. Have you ever heard this term before?
I have not.
Okay, so rice bowl means that I will keep you dangling a carrot on a string for the rest of your natural born life to learn this system, because I got to pay my bills. I got to pay my bills. And this is...
sorry to interrupt you, Mr. San Qing. So you're saying that Mo Pai is de-rice? Am I understanding?
No. What I'm saying is, when you are interfusing these things and developing the skills that are necessary to actualize material change, you must be able to fortify the system that will run independently of the body. You will feel it. This is not like some type of transitory and permanent delusion. It will feel like the flesh. Your operating system from an architecture perspective will be burnt in, and it will feel like something is growing inside of you. That is not transitory and impermanent. That's what your immortal, eternal immortal self is. So Mao Pai, I came to the conclusion from my teacher Lao Tzu and from what I was given from John Chang through his son, and I got to have that relationship because of my employer. Was the system is not 72 levels, it's not. And you have to recognize it's not as difficult as you think it is. It's about actually creating the substance so things are tangible, and you have to build from the inside out. And it's not a slow system where many people talk about the body as something that you have to focus your attention on. No, when you recognize you're all things and nothing at the same time, it doesn't matter if you're hunched over, you're extended, you're in a certain form, the bones are aligning. It's just wrong. And I know a lot of your audience are going to be martial artists, and many of them are steeped in a certain system. I could teach Bagua, Tai Chi, other things like that. They mean nothing. Qigong means nothing if you can't turn the system on. If you can't use that internal force that is forever, then all of it means butkus, really. It's pretty simple. Even before I even met the actual cultivational practice, if we go back to when I started the meditation, that meditation with that woman started with me being completely consumed by the exterior. So I'm hunched over like an ape in this meditation class trying to get comfortable, and this Grand Master who comes up to my eyebrows when she's standing will just walk around the room. And I thought I was absolutely never going to master this because it was the first day. I didn't know what. You didn't have the internet back in those days. So today you can research anything, you can AI anything, you can do all this stuff. Back in those days, I had one thing: mindset, control the mind. And I would do that in bodybuilding and powerlifting very easily, very, very easily. And so I didn't think that was what was the focus of the training. So when she got my attention, I'm in pain, my back's aching, I'm hearing all these external noises, I can't stay focused, I'm thinking I'm just going to get up and leave this meditation. Her words were very simple: I want you to listen to my voice. And that puckered up. It started to create a charge in my body. And then she said, then everything will fall away. And at that point, Ken, I experienced the stopping of sound for 20 minutes. Everything was silent. I'm looking at her and there was no sound. She's talking away. She's looking around. She'd walk up to me with my eyes open and smile. And the sound had disappeared for 20 minutes straight. And I went, holy shit, this is the superpower I've been looking for. This is part of this is what I've been desiring since I was a young boy. This is made up of superheroes like the Hulk, Superman, Spider-Man. All these things were being actualized. And that's when things started to pop off. That's when things got really crazy. So from that point, the next day, I went to a channeling class through the classifieds again. I turned up to the class, and this guy looked at me and went, no, you're not right for this class. Of course, I was a big bodybuilder, and they're like just little vegan anorexics, breatharians sucking in air, whatever it was. And he's looking at me going, no, you're not good. I'm like, whoa. Please take my money. I want to do this, because I was getting this very clear voice saying, do the channeling class. And I was persistent for a minute or two and finally said, I'll take your money. But he goes, I want you to be very clear. You're not going to get anything out of this. You're not even ready for channeling. right? You can't do it. And so when I sat down, I popped off. I drew in Latsu into my body. That was a full visceral, kinesthetic, somatic experience. I emanated more heat and light than anyone had ever seen. This guy crapped his pants. He'd been doing it 60 years. Everyone in the class took their sticks and their marshmallows and sat around the fireplace from my heat and emanation because of the pure source of Latsu. And that was my instant connection, remembering who I was and the immortal self. And so I started channeling Latsu, and he became a constant that I could see in front of me, to the side of me. And I could see him with my eyes open. I could hear his voice. And I thought I was having a psychotic break. I thought I was losing my mind. I was like, that's it. Because I had no reference. I had nothing. And the following day, this same guy was teaching clairvoyance. And that's where it got kind of interesting, because the reason I attribute my self-realization and the expedience of my self-realization to the fact that I have one golden rule. I'll try anything once, and I'll accept everything at face value, which is the childlike state that you need to be in to truly receive these types of levels of awareness. It doesn't come from anything else other than that. And so that reminded me who I was. So third day clairvoyance, he's teaching it, and he'll give you a menu. And I do the same thing when I teach people. I don't front load them. I don't give them expectations. I don't have their imagination kind of manipulate the system, because that's just distortion, and you're never going to perceive the true essence of things and turn everything on if you're being manipulated by your mind, right? So the third day I was being taught clairvoyance. And so that clairvoyance was, here's the script. You do this, this, and this, and this. You chant this incantation, you say that, you do that. I'm like, okay. So I followed the instruction, and he goes, I tell you what, because he was at this point had a real disdain for me, because he'd been channeling 60 years, and some Neanderthal walks in to a channeling class and channels like an immortal like Latsu, and like the pearls of wisdom that were emanating from me, not just physically, but through the words, were second to none. I couldn't believe it. And when you're experiencing that from the actual catalyst perspective, it's as if you are observing something that is independent, which comes down to the energy potential also, and how you create that. So I was given the script, and then I looked at him. He goes, all right, read me. You're so smart. You channeled Latsu. How about see if you can do any of this stuff? And my switching on of all my senses and the energy potential was instantaneous. I looked at him, and next minute the spirits came in, and they were talking to me about him ciphering the energy from his students with a contract with a succubus that was consuming them from the inside out as a cannibalistic thing. And he made a contract with them that if you allow me to access higher levels of awareness, we call them sensory perceptions, like remote viewing and projection and things of that nature, we call it spirit projection, you can take all that through your sacrifice of your students. And so I relayed that message to him, and I said, oh, by the way, this energy said that if you don't continue to give me more and more students, I will kill you. And he just looked like this. And he went white. And he went, get up, get up, get up, go in the other room, go in the other room. We were in a sort of a setting where there were separate spaces. He goes, where did you get that information from? I said, you just taught me the essence and fundamentals of clairvoyance, and I'm following the script just like you gave me. And he's like, holy shit. And I said, well, whoa, what do you mean, holy shit? I'm like, well, what are you saying? Because I was more fixated on, did I get a result? I am a driven guy that has a goal. If I want to get stronger and bigger, I add 5 plates, I do 20 reps, and this acquires a hypertrophy and a gain of anaerobic endurance through a formula, right? And really all of this is formula-based method conditioning. People need to understand all this alchemy is a conditioning and method, right? So he's like, I just want to explain something. And I'm like, whoa, are you telling me that this is real? Because I mean, I'm 3 days in. I've never done this before. Are you telling me what I said to you is actually correct? And he's like, listen, I need to explain this to him. I'm like, whoa, did I really read this information right now? And at that point, I was already on a psychotic break because I'm seeing old gray men talking to me, and I'm visually seeing them. So I'm thinking I'm about to go 3 cents short of $1. I'm going psychotic. I'm having a break. It's like this shit is so crazy. And so I read him instantaneously. I said, listen, part of this is if you don't give this energy what it wants, it's going to kill you. He's like, I'm working on it. I'm like, really? Working on it. Now, to his testament, 6 months later, I was holding him in my arms and he died from brain cancer. So it's like he refused to give up the power. And this is what most of these people do. They get this fixation of power in the material world. If you don't recognize the spirit world controls this state, you're making a big mistake. If you think that it just doesn't come with a price, that you don't have to actualize yourself to make yourself whole, and that's where most people fundamentally fall down. They cultivate these practices and they basically cannibalize the physical body, the Jing, and they don't replenish it. They don't codify it. They don't actualize it. For me, I teach people from the low level of the Jing, mastering the 50 trillion cells that you believe is your flesh and blood that looks back at you in the mirror. And from that, we take you from your first conceived, perceived birth self. And I use a battery as a metaphor. So you're born into this world with a battery pack that's normally about 80%. I've never seen someone come in at 100%. And from that, you take that strength of that battery pack, and through the alchemical process of Daoist alchemy, you bring your battery up to 100%, from 100 to 1,000, from 1,000 to 9,000. You become superhuman and bulletproof, bringing immortality, crystallizing it into the material state. That's where you get down with the get down. All of a sudden, now you are tuning to your absolute stream of holiness that does not require the participation of the finite mind. That is where you will see miracles. Most healers, over close to 40 years, I see all the healers. They get caught up in the energy. I can move the energy. I can do that. I can channel spirits. I'm a psychic, a medium. What happens is they're very inverted. And so the inversion is the absorption of this yin or the absorption of yang, and it starts to corrupt the system. It corrupts the body. It corrupts, and you will see the mortal effects of that. The body will start to break down. The hubcaps will come off the wheels. The suspension will break. The steering will break. The engine will break because they get fixated on the energy potential. And, you know, you get people that fear you into being cautionary with Mo Pai or any sort of internal alchemy, Neigong. This is a fundamental flat-out lie when you can actually transmute anything. One of the first things that I had to do through my ordinance and being ordained as a priest is you have to be able to remove alcohol from a bottle and place it into another bottle. And the test of it is you pop the bottle that you've taken, say it's a bottle of vodka, you have to remove the alcohol from the bottle of vodka and place it into a bottle with water. And the test is you be able to consume that bottle 5 seconds afterwards. If you drink it in its entirety, a liter of alcohol, and it's alcohol, you're either going to like get alcohol poisoning or get close to that or die. So there's no in-betweens. That transmuted state of that tactile effect, like just basically Spider-Man being able to transmute things and transform things, is fundamental within the alchemical process. It's altering the material state. So most people tend to just stay in the periphery and they look at the system from something as infantile as Chinese medicine and meridians, and that's great, but you're going to fall short on your sword because the body will speak louder than words, and you will find that there is a breaking point, that the system is limited. That, okay, I'll use telekinesis. I'm moving an object. It's coming from my mind, and it's coming from the stream of energy of my body. Great. I can absorb that. I can move that. Or a psychic ability, clairvoyance. You can see into the future. You can see into people's minds, all that kind of good stuff. If you're not met with a solidified holiness, this will any healer that I've ever come across lives between the ages of 40 and maybe 65, and they spend their currents with your attention. Intention goes your energy. And so anything you do requires a piece of yourself, unless you master the state that you never acquire that from your physical composure. So you have to be able to recognize that the Jing, that is the avatar that you use from a highest level. I teach people what they call Shen Gong, which is spirit projection. That is the power. You are immortalizing the spirit in a crystallized form in a material world. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And do you want me to stop or?
Oh, no, you can keep going.
Yeah. So understanding how these systems work and how you enrich this vehicle will give you levels of longevity. I refer to that as supple materialized. I teach people the supple aspect, where you crystallize that. So you draw in the heat and the moisture, so there's an equal flow of these potentials within that. It's a symbiotic dance between yin and yang from one stream. It's one stream. And by nurturing the flesh, you're able to have dominion over that and over the material world. It's a constant. It flows constantly. It's not an intermittent sort of state where I wake up one day, I can do it, and then I can't do it the other. Or if I do it for a long period of time, I get exhausted, which is the most fundamental issue with a lot of energy healers, Neigong practitioners, Qigong practitioners, Reiki masters, all this kind of stuff. There's a cap on what they can actualize from a material world. It's like, party tricks I used to love to do was just pull my arm out and put a skewer through it, pull it out. There's no entry or exit wound to the arm. That's just alchemizing my body in anesthesia, and that's a state of what you would perceive as trance. You can easily access these different levels of resonance when you acquire the cultivational practice. Does that make sense, or have I gone too far on that? I don't know.
No, you did great. Yeah, thank you for explaining all this stuff. So let's talk about your future goals a little bit. Obviously you have a podcast right now. You're doing podcasts and stuff like that, but you're also, as you described a lot about your experiences and what you're capable of doing. You are a phenomenal teacher and practitioner of,
Daoist. Past the clairvoyance, the next day, I witnessed I experienced distant healing. So one of my friends sprained her ankle, and I was talking to her over the phone, and I just finished distant healing training. And so I applied the script, which was an incantation, then an admission of that frequency. And her ankle was the size of a cantaloupe. It shrunk down to its regular size. She was standing on it in minutes. That was my first evidence of physical healing. And she took photos of it. Back in those days, they're called Polaroids. She took photos of that. And from that, it went to the final, basically, piece de resistance, which is I witnessed physical flesh that was gangrenous in color turn back to pink in about 40 minutes. And that was through the guidance of my teacher.
Very cool. So anybody that's embarking currently on an energy journey right now, or they were looking to become energy healers, perhaps, or just energy healers, like something typically people get in this for. What would your advice be?
Well, energy healing is just the tip of the iceberg. You can either be a jack of all trades and a master of nothing, or you can actually acquire a path that of self-realization that is not distorted by, your desire for power, which is generally what most people get into. They want to be consumed by the power. They want to manipulate and control others. This is the very desire that comes from an external state. It's not coming from their heart. And so when you recognize that, everything goes back into the melding pot, because there's degrees of development as you start to acquire those higher states. Something as entertaining as like levitation, right? I don't know whether you've ever trained in levitation or what it takes to be in that state of reverse inverted actualization. Is where you take out the substance of something and you're now basically floating. So you're inverted in your effect. I think some point I saw somewhere, maybe you're on like a podcast, aerokinesis. What do you call that? What is that?
You're asking me what aerokinesis is?
Yeah. Were you teaching that, or you were studying that at one point?
So what are you asking me what aerokinesis is? Like it's the ability to move the wind,
right?
To influence the wind,
right? But at one point, I know that you were.
I've never been a teacher. I'm just a podcaster.
Oh, right. Because
I may have like talked about it. Like
you were on. I think it was Cesar Paragon's.
Caesar's podcast. Yeah. He kind of
on you.
Yeah. He kind of like hyped me up to make me seem like I'm like this powerful telekinetic energy guy, but I'm really not. So I mean, he's nice. Right. He's nice, and I'm sure you get this as well. I mean, you are obviously a very powerful guy, but like I think the biggest misconception of people have about me is that people perceive, because I am public, I'm a public's energy guy, figure people think that I'm like this high level guy, but I'm not. Like I'm literally just a podcaster. So like I want to make that clear.
Yeah. I mean, but in the evidence of superpowers, we call them transformative skills. Everything from shape shifting to spirit projection, all this kind of good stuff. Shen Gong specifically, you have to understand that when you're inverted, you're transmuting the actual substance. So objects can be altered at will. The substance of that object, that's part of the path of transmutation for healing. So levitation is a classic one. I have the formula for that. You just have to acquire the resonance. I've only ever seen 3 people levitate in my lifetime. 2 were Indonesian masters from the jungles of Indonesia, and both of them were morally corrupt and deviant, squabbly in their nature. They were far from evolved, but they'd smoke a bag of weed a day, and they could levitate 5 feet in the air. But that doesn't make them an enlightened person. It just makes them someone that has spent a lot of time conditioning themselves to acquire that state. And of course, the third one was one of my students. And most people are like, well, how come you don't levitate? Because I couldn't give a shit about levitating. It means nothing to me. There's all these baubles on the road to self-realization that you have to meet with that is really important. And the fixation that people get on one over the other is where the system gets corrupted. Because the more you fixate on that, the more the energy is drawn to that, the more it starts to come out of the body, and you'll see the fundamental effects where you sell your soul as opposed to you are actually basically spending your mortal sense. The body is a temple. The body is an amplification, which brings me to Mr. Damadi and his son. At one point when he was in Indonesia for 3 weeks, one of his sons was in a coma and he was dying from complications of a fatal disease. And I was pulled to his bedside from his daughter. And basically, through his direction, I communicated with him in the spirit world. I kept him alive for 2 weeks until his father walked through the door. The second his father walked through the door, he hugged him, and then he went flatline. He went straight in a flat line. And the doctors were fascinated because I was teaching them how to move the energy through the body. So he was having complications of the immune system just cannibalizing itself. So you teach you how to regulate all the organs, from the liver to the spleen to the lungs to the heart to the kidneys. This system has to be optimized, and the 4 directions have to be met to start with that foundational process of growth and development. Without it, you're not going to amount to much. You'll never really, end with a result, which is so key. And so, my experience from, the Mo Pai perspective is just like all the other systems that people train in. You need to spend 10 years. That's just a fundamental bullshit lie. It's just a lie. It's like, I've turned people into phenomenal healers given their actualized state within 3 months, because you have to understand the true nature of self. And that is, you are me, I am you. When you fear someone into existence, you will always be corrupted by your weakest link. Whatever's sticking around in the shadows of your unconscious mind in the periphery will be the thing that is self-consuming. The magic, which is my personal favorite, one of my all-time favorites, I love teaching the magic, is Daoist magic is predicated on your karmic model. I will consume the fear-based individual. If you're suggestible, you are fear-based. If you're emotional, you're suggestible. Magic within Taoism works on creating everything as whole. Creation, completion, and rebirth. When we alchemize this within a grid, we use star stepping, and we call on all our immortal teachers, different phases of that, specifically Li Gong that I spoke of earlier. Li Gong is within the alchemy system with Supreme Thunder God. That's how you codify electric potential within the body through the spleen and the pancreas. That's how you alchemize the thunder magic. And furthermore, you turn on systems that make it possible for you to concentrate that energy and, emit electric shocks. I guess if that floats your boat, if that gets you all warm and fuzzy inside, that's a transitory and permanent thing, because most people will meet it with the mind. So they codify it in the body and they're using the system, but it's for power. It's not for eternal remembrance. When you do it from an eternal remembrance, it happens to be a side effect of you as an absolute holy stream as one, not a transitory, impermanent, myopic version of self that's fixated on a material state that is not mortalized. It's impermanent. It's transitory. It will deconstruct. It's fundamentally corrupt, which is what life is about. As long as you are breathing from this realm, you are deconstructing yourself and corrupting the system. So, when I teach people primordial breath from the mother, we breathe, you've probably heard of terms like bone breathing and things of that nature. We breathe from consciousness. We're not breathing from the respiration. You're breathing from the center of self, which is a holy stream that does not require any form of inhalation and exhalation. You are now at a point of complete potency where you will not exhibit any breath that will be a physical emanation. You will notice that it is a one stream thing. The longest I've ever held my breath is 18 minutes.
Wow, that's impressive.
But that's where you codify the body. That's the secret sauce. Between yin and yang is the pause. That's where you get the gateway. That's where all of a sudden you gather what we refer to as absorbing the riches, where you accumulate that substance. And that's where the magic starts to take place. The rubber hits the road and things become really, really freaky, because you're no longer breathing from the body. You're breathing from the substance. And furthermore, just something like embryonic breathing, which you've probably heard of, you have to feed that the human sense of self from the dantian as you bleed the saliva, which is the pearl, and you drop it down into the dantian. It grows within you like a flower in the soil. You drop that seed in, and it's realized. Most of my students, when I give them that level of training, it's like you grow. It's like a balloon. It will start to expand, and you'll freak out. You'll be like, what the is this? This is crazy. How is that possible? But, the biggest misconception is you're contorted by your mortal self within a personality grade, and things like adjectives, swearing, blasphemy, all these moral compass nonsense things is where people get distorted and separated from themselves, because the more and more they get caught up in the trappings of the human condition, the more and more they get further and further away from their potential, because this is all a distortion. None of it's real. None of it. None of it. You cannot create from diminished, corrupted returns of distortion, which is energy potential in this material state. That's not how you find the holiness. You must be able to come from one stream. So you are me, I am you. It doesn't matter. It's like, what am I afraid of? Like most, anyone's a practitioner of medical Qigong or things of that nature, they're very caught up in the protectionary effects. I would say continue doing that if you are fearful, because fearlessness is not a requirement. It is absolutely a fundamental effect of you codifying yourself. Fearlessness does not come from you working your way out of it in the mind. You take it from a resonance level, because the energy potential is the symbiosis between yin and yang from the one stream. That is energy potential. That's the currency of this dualistic experience. Then that has vibratory, frequential, and ultimately resonance. Once you acquire the resonance precedes you. Like your reputation precedes you. When you walk into a room, you have a fundamental effect, an ambrosia effect on the exterior, the external state. It enriches people. Does that make sense? And so when you're following that, you will find crazy things start taking place, but it comes from the inside out. So you will change the effect of things. Just as your softness and your curiosity brings pause to people, and they find that your demeanor and your approach to sharing with others makes it exciting, because guess what? You're a very acceptant and gracious, and your humility is second to none. This comes from wanting to learn more, wanting to embody more, and dipping in and out. But I mean, the absence of self is more a disheartening. It's a hardening of the heart. You're an experiencer. If you pursue these energy potentials, you need to get results. It needs to be repeatable. I'm a Pepsi challenge guy from the 80s. I'll take the Pepsi taste test with anyone on this shit, meaning that you need to apply yourself and show me results. If you're giving me some practice and I'm flailing in the corner of the room on some exercise that is redundant, that keeps going over and over again, and I spent 6 months on it, and the only thing I've got is a headache and a backache, ask yourself, where are we having a disconnect? Why is there not a meeting? Because when you self-actualize with the right system, it happens at an expedient level that will blow your mind. It doesn't take years. This is the lie. Anyone that tells you it takes 10 years to reach Fa Chi is lying. Anyone that tells you it takes 10 years to reach Fa Jin, they're lying. It comes down. Yeah, you have to get a system that's actually repeatable and bears fruit. That means that you need to see results. You're an experiencer. We're all experiencers. The experiential moment is the only thing we have. If we're not getting a rebounding effect of evidence, what are we doing here?
Mr. San Qing, you obviously spoke a lot today. I couldn't really find the opportunity to interrupt you, but so you're saying that people could learn Fa Chi if they wanted to, if that's something they want to do. Not that it's like a important thing per se, but like you're saying that people can learn that in a much shorter time if they follow your system.
1 million%.
1 million%.
Everything is instant. Everything is instant. None of this dragged out mortal hierarchy of nonsense. Kiss the ring. You got to go to the special teacher, and through all that, you're going to find yourself, because that's a hierarchy. The martial form creates that hierarchy.
Mr. San Qing, I typically like to let people talk. I hate to interrupt people and stuff like that. But is it okay if I interrupt you?
No, go ahead. Look, I was rambling because you hadn't asked me a question.
I apologize.
Go straight ahead.
Sometimes, like, I know, I'm sure you get this as a podcaster from time to time. Like I used to. In my old days, like, people be like, Ken, you interrupt people way too much. You got to let people talk. And that's a common criticism I get. So I let people talk. And so, but now it's like, some people are like, dude, Ken, ask more friggin' questions. So it's like,
ask all the questions. You know what I would say? I would say, I don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks.
Okay.
This is a very, all this bullshit where they're subjecting you to their own moral compass when they're keyboard warriors sitting in a dark room in their mother's basement telling you how you should conduct yourself on your own podcast. They need to grow a pair and stop being a beta bitch and recognize they have that true essence within them. And, a lot of people find that abrasive, that I'm a priest and that I will speak in those volumes, but that's the problem. Energy and the universe and absolute truth does not require my participation. My personality, I'll never erase it. That's a mistake. I love driving my side by side in the desert 100 miles an hour. I eat chocolate bonbons, and I still subscribe to Netflix. That has never needed me to meet that moment. Whenever I've witnessed a healing, I'm nothing. I'm not San Qing. I'm not the environment. I'm not calling in angels. That moment is now, and it is all powerful. That charge you and I are getting right now is the evidence of true self. That's the power. Go ahead. Ask me a bunch of questions. Go ahead.